TalkTV has had mixed coverage of the war in Gaza. Piers Morgan has hosted some of the best conversations around, though he doesn't always cover himself in glory. But some people on the station have been consistently ridiculous. One of them is James Whale. On Sunday, he was joined by a former trade union official, Steve Headley, to discuss the situation.
Are you completely stupid, Steve? Are you completely nuts?
Well,
I mean, you come in here dressed in a scarf with a I
Palestinian
support.
scarf.
Do you actually
Palestinian
really
scarf,
support the Palestinians?
Absolutely.
You think that's a really
What about Hamas? What about Hamas?
I defend the Palestinians' right to defend themselves.
Yeah.
Do you say Hamas it was a resistance?
Sorry, I believe the Israeli government are a fascist government. I believe the Israeli government are a terrorist government.
It's a democratic government,
hang on.
It's a democracy.
So that's the case. Hitler was
I'm not
elected,
having
so
this.
he's democratic, is he?
This is not on.
Well, of
you
course
want to
it's on.
talk rubbish? Go and talk to the BBC or some other.
But what do you think about the Hamas?
I don't want you.
What about free speech?
Was
James?
Hamas a
You've got free speech.
legitimate action?
You're saying it, but I don't need to listen
what
to
I'm
your
saying to you
report.
is that I condemn terrorism, whether it comes from Hamas or from the Israeli government.
You agree
Right, so it has come from
With the
Hamas, but
Israeli
not from
government.
Israel. That's a
Of course
war, isn't it?
Of course it has.
Well, no, that's defending themselves,
no,
isn't it?
because
Of course
it's an occupied people.
Well, it is now. It wasn't in 2005.
It can't be self-defense.
They're not occupied.
It wasn't in
2005.
They've been occupied since 1947 when they drove the
They
Palestinians
went
off
out in
their
2000.
land.
You
Don't be
want to look at
silly.
your history books. 2005, they all left.
1947
big
is when
gap
the
in your
Nakba
knowledge there.
happened. I've never met such ill-informed people in my life.
Quiet. I don't want you in here anymore, Steve, because you are supporting
Right,
the
so you're
enemies of
throwing
this
me out,
country.
James, because you the defender of free speech, are throwing me out.
You've had free speech, but I
You,
don't
the
have to allow
defender
you
of
to
free
carry
speech,
on.
are throwing me out.
I am defending the freedom of this country.
This is not on. It's not on. I won't accept this. You disagree with me. This is not on. By the way, those people are being paid. James Whale is paid to do that. Could you believe it? Fair play in a way. Apparently, Mr. Whale is defending the freedom of this country. Well, if he is, then we're more screwed than I thought. And apparently, Palestine isn't occupied. Mr. Whale, they have no airports. They have no control over their border. Israel doesn't even recognize these as international borders. That's the problem. There is no sovereign Palestinian state. So, of course, it's occupied. What else could it be? And how is it protecting Britain by supporting Israel? I must have missed that memo after all. At a recent settler conference in Jerusalem, attended by a third of the Israeli cabinet, a leading speaker said that the 2.5 million residents of Gaza could go to, guess where? England and Scotland. Her words. Lots of people on the right, particularly in the media, cheer those same people on, but then they whinge when the refugees come to Europe. It's almost like they're not very clever. Anyway, back to the video.
If we're at war, as we soon are going to be,
who
you
are
won't be
at war
able
with
to...
the Palestinian children who you're murdering in their
Do you
thousands.
support the 7/7 bombers then? Because they did that for the
Of course
Palestinian.
not.
Well,
Of
why
course
not?
not.
They did that for the Palestinian people. Do you support the Borough Market stabbings?
Do you support 30,000 dead
Could
people,
you
civilians?
remove him now?
Well, yeah, if
Do you
it's collateral
support-
damage, it's
do
illegal
you
war. It's the
support
lowest
killing
amount of
women and
collateral-
children?
It's the lowest amount of collateral
Genocide in
damage
Gaza.
ever.
Genocide
It's not
in Gaza.
genocide, is it?
Joke.
It's not
You're a
genocide,
joke.
is it?
You're a
25,000
Zionist
people
joke.
out of 2 million is
Just a
not
minute, just
genocide.
hang.
Do you support the 7/7 attacks? I mean, where do you begin with these people? By the way, after watching that clip, I recommend maybe doing some Sudoku or a crossword just to try and get some brain cells back. I'm sorry to do that to you. Shouldn't take long, maybe 20 minutes. The 7/7 attacks were 19 years ago. They had nothing to do with what's happening in Palestine in 2024. And the point around the deaths is interesting. Apparently 25,000 people out of 2 million isn't that many. It's 2.5 million. He says 2 million. It's not that many. Really? It's more than 1% of the population in a few months. Let's say a few months from now, the death toll is 50,000. That's 2% of the population. Is that still too low? Sorry, guys, more children need to die for me to care. Sorry, guys, more ICUs need to not work so newborns can die. Then I'll care. Maybe when it's 10%, 15%. For context, 2% of the population in the UK is about 1.3 million people. Would these guys consider that a lot? Apparently not. And apparently saying that all of this is bad, 25,000 people dying is bad, thousands of children dying is bad, women not having painkillers while giving birth, while having cesareans is bad. Apparently if you say this, it's offensive to Jewish people. Why? I think saying that's offensive to Jewish people, by the way. Now, you can disagree if there's genocide in Gaza. I've said before, I think it meets that threshold. But an ICJ court says there are grounds to ask the question. But apparently that offends you. Really? And next up, the conversation turned to the issue of Zionism.
Ash is
people-
Jewish,
it
and what
doesn't
you're
matter.
saying
I
to
don't
him
care
is
if you're
totally
Jewish.
offensive.
Jewish,
but it's
You're
not
a Zionist,
genocide,
but
is
you're
it?
not a Jew.
It's
I
not
know you're-
genocide. It's
you're a
irrelevant
Zionist.
anyway, but it's not
It's
genocide.
not, it's not about being Jewish,
Right,
it's about
Alex.
being a Zionist.
What is a Zionist?
A Zionist
Should the
is
Jews not have a
someone-
homeland then?
Well, why didn't they have
Should
one
the
in
Jews not
Bavaria?
have a
Why
homeland?
didn't they have one in Bavaria? It was the Germans
they
that had
shouldn't
the
have a-
Holocaust, not the
Should
Palestinians.
they have a? Was Israel never the homeland of the Jews?
Not in occupied Palestine, no.
Argue
It
anymore.
was.
I don't want him on the show
That's
anymore.
why they
They
find old
occupied
Jewish texts from
Palestine.
3,000 years
They
ago. there.
occupied
Don't
Palestine.
want that either.
They
They
occupied
came from the
Palestine.
Arab. Most of them come from the Arab countries that were
They built
expelled.
people, they ransomed ever since.
Most of them were expelled from the Arab countries. Most of Israel.
No, that's not true. The
55%.
Arab
Can you be quiet?
countries
Yeah,
actually-
seriously, can you be
Egypt,
quiet?
The Arab countries
I'd like you to
actually
leave.
gave the Jews
could you
refuge
turn that
when
mic
the
off?
Holocaust was
Yeah.
happening.
Turn the
How
mic
about
off.
that?
They
You
were on the
don't know your
Nazi
history,
side.
Ash.
You don't know your history.
You don't know your history.
I don't know what
Ash.
he says. I'm executive producer.
Are
Turn it off.
you arguing that the Nakba took place?
Will
The United
you
Nations
go
recognized that the
away?
Nakba
You
took
talk
place.
rubbish.
The
You're talking rubbish. You know
United
rubbish.
Nations recognized that the
Well, I'm
Nakba
trying
took
to
place.
kick him out. What do you want me to do?
Israel
Is the
now-
UN?
Israel
Is this the
is
UN that
now-
were on the Hamas
Israel-
attack?
Israel
Is this
is
the UN that are
being
totally
brought
bent and
before
corrupt
the international
organisations?
court of
Do you mean that UN?
This is a TV station on a broadcast, right? It's not a YouTube show. If I behaved like that, by the way, I'd get a ticking off from Fox, from Gary, from everybody here at Novara Media. What the hell has happened to Aaron? So unprofessional. This is a TV station regulated by Ofcom. And that line about the UN being totally bent and corrupt. Evidence, please. And by the way, who is this Ash guy next to James Whale? It's like the Chuckle Brothers minus the professionalism and the laughs. Headley mentions the Nakba there. You're talking rubbish. You're talking rubbish, the Nakba. Translation, we have no idea what you're talking about. The biggest problem in media isn't dealing with people who don't know the facts. That happens. These guys don't know that they don't know. They don't want to know the facts. They have no capacity for critical reflection of how they might be wrong. So what precisely are they adding to their audience? Where's the value? Open question. Anyway, let's see how this ends.
Hamas didn't exist when in 1947 when you started occupying their land. Hamas didn't exist. We have Netanyahu making the same statements about Hamas that he did about the PLO.
They're very similar. Very, very similar. Same thing. Terrorists.
Oh, really?
Same thing.
Your state is a terrorist state, isn't it, Ash? That's the reality.
No.
Britain's a terrorist state. America's a terrorist state. And Israel is a terrorist state.
Think that?
This is the reality of it. Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
What, it's not a terrorist state, is it?
It's a terrorist state.
Right, come on.
James, you trying to assault me, James. You trying to assault me, James.
I'm an old man with cancer. You
Well,
can
James,
go
don't please.
Well, do what I ask and go.
I'm not going to go. And you won't be able to remove me, James, so please don't.
Why? What are you going to do?
Well, I'm making a statement here for
A
Palestine.
statement of rubbish. Just talking rubbish.
Take your book and go out and support Palestine. I know you want to hit me.
I'm not going to hit you,
No,
James.
you're not. You're absolutely right.
Not at
You're
all.
not.
Not at
You
all.
equate Hamas with Israel.
You're a
You
silly
say they're
little
the same
man.
thing.
You're a silly little
insult me
man.
as much
A
as you
genocide enabler. A genocide enabler,
You
James.
talk crap. That's
You're
all you can
genocide
spout.
enablers.
All you can spout is that crap, isn't it? Genocide.
Free
and that.
Palestine.
From the river to the sea.
Well, you can certainly see why their ratings aren't the best over at TalkTV. And why invite the guy on if you don't like what he's got to say, to the point he's escorted off air? Mike, besides the politics of what's being discussed, this thing looked ridiculous, amateurish. Some people might be saying, well, why share it then? Why talk about it? It matters because actually this is a media product owned by Rupert Murdoch, and that's probably the most influential person in British public life and politics over the last 40, 50 years.
Absolutely. We know how influential kind of Murdoch has been in recent years, and this is one of his products. Like, I found there's so much to unpick there, Aaron. How honesty is unbelievable, the behavior. The line at the end, we says, I know you want to hit me as well. Just baffling. I think this does speak to the liberal consensus on Palestine, right, and on Israel. So when it comes to Israel, right, you must critique Israel according to the liberal consensus with the caveat of, Israel has the right to defend itself, So there must be that caveat, or you must use the most evasive and passive language possible. That's what most of these kind of liberal commentariats wants, right? To be fair, that's not really liberal commentary anyway. That's like kind of right-wing commentary, but you get my point. So I think that's what people want on Israel, right? And what's funny is TalkTV have had some of the most kind of right-wing thinkers go on there and talk about pro-Palestinian protesters in the most emphatic and apocalyptic terms possible. You know, the idea that these people are enemies of the country and we need to defend the country against these people. Whenever I've gone to the protests, I'm seeing kind of this really lovely coalition of people, whether it's environmentalists or lecturers or just teachers, ordinary people, people from the Labour Party, people from the Green Party, people from all walks of life, Christians, Muslims, Jews, are attending these protests because they care deeply what's happening in Gaza. Yet on Talk TV, you can have a guy go on there and say, these are enemies to the nation. We must defend the nation against them. Talking almost in terms of unit power. These people have come to our country and are now raising this Islamist views that needs to be tackled. So I think that's the bigger issue here. That's why this story is important, right? Because we need to push back against the idea that the pro-Palestine movement is evil and any critique of Israel is also evil. These two things aren't true. Israel can be criticized, and also the pro-Palestine movement is not this evil Islamist movement that's trying to take over Britain. We're raising genuine concerns for those in Gaza. I think on a Talk TV point of view, it's just amateurish. It's absolutely amateurish. And I think the biggest problem for me is, you're having a left-wing guy come onto your show. The conversation might eventually end up on the issue of Gaza. You generally know what a left-wing person is going to say on Gaza. If that offends you, why bring that person on in the first place? It's genuinely bizarre. And I think what's funny is the kind of right pretend to be these free speech defenders. We defend free speech against the woke left and the wokies. But yet when someone says anything vaguely against their kind of stance or standpoints, that person must be ushered out of the studio in this kind of ridiculous manner. So I think they haven't cut themselves in glory, but I think the bigger picture here for us is the kind of liberal consensus, the kind of general consensus on how we can and can't talk about Israel. And it's something we need to push back against quite firmly, I think.
There's two things I want to say in response to that. The first is, I think you're absolutely right. The reason why the right-wing press has really had a default setting of just anger, vitriol, stupidity often, but it's emotions over facts, right? It is because they don't have the facts. On this issue, they do not have the facts on their side. Now, I'm not saying Steve Headley was bringing facts, Barnaby Raines style, but they couldn't have a sensible conversation based upon historical fact. He talks about the foundation of the State of Israel. He talks about the Nakba. They literally don't know what he's talking about. So they need to talk about things like 7-7. Why are you siding with the enemies of this country? Palestine's not done anything to this country. By the way, the Haganah, prior to the formation of the State of Israel's Zionist terrorist group, they were responsible for bombing the King David Hotel in the 1940s. I think over 20 UK nationals died. They hanged two British service personnel who were conscripts around the same time. This was far-right Zionist terrorists. So you say, well, do you condemn terrorism? Of course. Do you condemn the Zionist terrorism, which, by the way, was being acted on, led by some of the people like Menachem Begin, who became literally the most senior politicians in Israeli public life? Do you condemn them? But they don't even know this stuff. They don't know any of it. They're completely ignorant. Now, that's why we're here at Novara Media. We're here to talk about the facts, talk about context, talk in a serious tone about serious issues. But I think this is really, really key. The reason why they chucked him out, in short, is because they can't have that conversation. They're unable to have that conversation. And then secondly, look, on the left, we like to talk about, the big bad wolf of the right. They've got the billionaires on their side. They're incredibly powerful. But look, guys, this is a shambles. These people are a joke. Not all of them, many of them. And the idea that the left can't build a counterpoint to something as ridiculous as James Whale and Talk TV, I kind of find hard to believe. It's going to take a long time, but we'll get there. And like I say, it's that little bit easier when you have the facts on your side.